I know you all just got done hearing me for 30 some minutes, and now you get to listen to me a little more. So, why am I being baptized today is the grand question. Here I have been teaching and preaching and been going at it pretty hard over the last few years. And so let me just start at the beginning. I'll give you the highlights, and then I'll get into how in the world I got to this point here where I'm being baptized in February of 2025. So I was baptized when I was 7 years old. I remember sitting there in a pew. It was Communion Sunday. Everyone else got to take a drink and got to have the wafer, and I didn't. And so, well, Dad, how can I get to take the wafer and the juice? I want to take that. And so, they go through the whole rigmarole. Do you believe that Jesus died on the cross? Well, yeah, sure. And so on and so forth. And I followed along. I did the sinner's prayer and got baptized. Don't necessarily remember it. I have a picture of it, I believe, on my grandma's fridge, or she used to. But from then on, I had no fruits. I didn't know what regeneration was. I didn't understand what a testimony was. And so when I would see these people throughout my youth and in my teenage years and my young adult life, I'd see these people stand up and talk about all these great works that God had done and this and that. I didn't understand any of it. I had convinced myself that that truly all salvation was just reciting a prayer, and that was it. I was done. I was locked in. There's nothing more to it. And that arrogance grew throughout my teenage years. I had convinced myself that I knew everything that I needed to know about the Bible. My dad was a preacher, so I had pretty good inroads with the congregants. I knew exactly what to say. I knew exactly how to act. I wore that Christian mask really well. But when I was alone or with my friends, that mask came off, and I was my real self. And what would happen is, as I continued to get older, the things that I should have been doing, I wasn't doing. I was basically living two separate lives, abusing the trust of my family and my friends, and doing whatever I wanted. But hey, I had repeated the prayer. I was set. It wreaked havoc. I mean, as I said, I played the part really well, but I never truly knew the love of God. I never truly understood it. I could recite to you all the Bible facts. I could tell you factually what was going on, and I could recite to you whatever tidbits of trivia that you had, and I was pretty proud of that. But at the end of the day, any rite that I did, anything that I did within the church or within my life that was actually good, I actually did because I was taught that way, and I didn't want to disappoint my father. That's really what it amounted to. I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to disappoint those who looked to me, and so my obedience was not driven out of a faithfulness to God. It was every bit of me trying to make everyone else proud, and thus lifting up my own pride, because I always enjoyed getting a good old-fashioned attaboy. And that was that. So as I got older, my rebellion continued to increase. My distance to God increased. The moment I moved out, I started, the first service I cut out was a Wednesday night. I had plenty of reasons not to go, and so that's what I did. I had good excuses. And so I wasn't going to get harassed about it, so I quit coming on Wednesday nights. And then Sunday nights got cut out. During this time, I'd went to college, and everything was looking successful. And by the time I got out, I was getting married, and everything came to a head there in my early 20s. Is where this goes. By the time I was 25, 26, the wheels had come off. I was in a miserable marriage. Everything was going wrong. Um, I was angry. I blamed God for everything because in my mind, I'd done everything right. I'd done everything wrong, but I was arrogant and said I did everything right. I blamed God for it. And the days got darker and darker. Um, there were times I even contemplated suicide because I felt that that was the only way to escape from the life that I had at that time. And it was awful. It was truly, truly terrible. So I got divorced in February of 28, and it was probably one of the worst things I've ever had to put up with. It was awful, and I still deal with the consequences of that to this day. But um, God humbled me and broke me down over many years, many hard years. And so, in the summer of 2018, Tara and I were together, and I decided I was going to head back to Dad's church. I'd been out of it for a couple years at that point, and I'd been attending elsewhere where I was random, anonymous, and no one knew what was going on, and I could just do whatever I wanted, and I didn't have to worry about accountability. I didn't like accountability, didn't think it should be enforced within the church, and so when I showed up in 2018, I was of the opinion I had nothing to apologize for. And I had even told my wife that, we'll just continue to act as if nothing had ever happened. I didn't sinfully get divorced. I did nothing wrong. And I'm certainly not ever going to have to stand before the church and give an account. I've learned a lot about saying things like that because as 2018 progressed, in December of 2018, my wife and I got married. I sought to make that right. But then the real work began in 2019. That's when I started feeling convicted of my state. And so leading up to the summer of 2019, one thing that I had noticed when I gotten back to church was that everyone else seemed to be blowing past me. Everyone knew more about God than what I did, and I couldn't figure out why. And so here I am attending Sunday school, and I'm trying to wrestle with what in the world is salvation and how does this thing work? And so in leading up to summer of 2019, I threw myself before God and finally admitted everything that I'd done wrong. I tossed aside my pride and humbled myself and just begged for forgiveness for everything, for every sin, for all the accusations I levied against him, for the doubts, because yet again by the end of it I didn't even think he was real. I thought I had. There was even a time in which I was teaching Sunday school and I didn't even know what I believed. I was teaching. That was awful. So that summer, I started feeling an actual revival within my soul. I was different, and I was convicted enough that I stood before the church on a Sunday night, and I apologized to all who was in attendance. I apologized to God, and I apologized for the pain I put my father through. Because at the end of the day, it was him who had been praying for me the most. It was him who had confronted me in my sin, and it was him who I had told that I didn't care. I was mad at him, and how dare he show up to tell me what I'm doing was wrong. And so I apologized to him. I apologized to the church and sought about letting God work in my life. And that's what he did. As 2020 came into play, we had COVID, and during that time, I focused on my relationship with God. I began praying more, studying more, and by the end of 2020, I have in my journaled notes where I was actually getting courage enough to be able to even pray out loud on a Sunday morning when they asked for a prayer. And I was so happy. I was so excited. Everything was coming into place. My faith exploded. So how do I get here? Well, what happened was, during 2021, I was focusing on, I had a couple things going on between 2020 and 2021. And that was, I was studying for my CPA exam, and my wife and I were trying to have a child. We were struggling, and nothing was working. And in August of 21, on a Sunday morning, I did a prayer, and man, I poured every ounce that I had into it. I journaled about it. It was just so shocking to myself. Just, it was as if I hadn't even been talking, but I was just so overwhelmed. In the following month, we found out Tara was pregnant, which was an answered prayer. And I got my CPA license, which was an answered prayer. And then in December of 21, we found out that our child was going to have all kinds of issues. Thus sent me to the throne of God again, praying as much as I could that this would not be the test that we would have. But as I would find that was absolutely necessary. Because when Micah was born, he had all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems. And God used it to yet again get my attention back to him, because yet again I'd been so distracted with the CPA stuff and the problems we were having with the pregnancy that I was starting to kind of drift off the path a little bit here, not studying as much, maybe not praying as much, but boom, kicked right back onto the path. And in July of 22 was when I truly started feeling called to be in some sort of teaching or ministry service. I truly felt that I was going to be called to pastor, but I didn't want to say that out loud. I was scared to say such a thing. I even, if you don't mind, I'd like to share, I have a journal entry that I have from that time, the kind of show you what was going on. Let's see here. There it is. Yeah. Okay. This was written on July 18th of 2022. It says, "For a long while, my very soul has been aching for more knowledge, more challenge, progress, etc., and all things related to my spiritual walk. I've not mentioned it much for whatever reason, but if Ben has any recollection, then he can vouch for the veracity of my statement, considering we've been improving his prayers for a year now. This ache came to a head finally, and I gave in and jumped in using Sunday school lessons as my diving board, and how blissful it's been. My prayers have lengthened and multiplied as I have continuously sought God. The Lord has been good and has held me fast, which is more than what I would ever thank him. I could ever thank him for. Once Micah was born, I was jarred out of the rut I was in. It took this whole event to awaken me and move me forward at a quick but glorious pace I thought would have been impossible. I felt a closeness with him, God, that I haven't felt. That's not to say that I was distant or not involved. I was very involved. However, it lacked a deeper understanding, or perhaps it lacked motivation. Either way, my soul was brought in close as God humbled me and showed me how he operates and how I have no power. As you see your child laying in a hospital bed attached to every wire available, and seeing them poke and prod that child while you sit helplessly to the side, watching and fretting, God was all I could rely on, and what sweet reliance that was. So I watched my relationship and faith explode at a rapid clip. Then as I'm studying for Sunday school, I'm finding that God's Spirit is moving and showing me things that I was missing, but everyone else could see. Then I threw myself in with reckless abandon, trusting God to either help me squirm through this, or at least or let me drown in the knowledge of the holy, which I'm not too sure would be a bad thing. Furthermore, I began reading once again. I haven't read in many years, and honestly, I haven't read anything of real mental consequence in quite a long time outside of the Bible and various lessons. I just accepted the crumbs I got here and there while not doing anything to expand my own knowledge. That changed finally as I have felt a burden uh, to study. I wish I could take credit for it all, but that would be a lie. No, this burden has pushed me to reading older books that are edifying for the soul and present our Christian beliefs in an unpolluted way. I wish to expand my reasoning and intelligence and knowledge of God so I can be of use however he may want to use me. I pray constantly for guidance and clarity of my calling that God would have for me. I still have no clear answers, and I will admit that I struggle with insecurity for it. I worry that my feelings towards study are illegitimate, but then I tell myself that such thoughts are foolish. I know better. I'm projecting and placing burdens on my soul that I shouldn't, and if I'm not careful, I'll sabotage myself. At this rate, I'm attempting to catch up on all the years I squandered. I'm enjoying the challenge and the learning. I also do not want to rush in unprepared for anything, and so I've set myself to continue to study and see where God leads with all of this. I pray that none of this is just me getting caught up in the moment. I don't believe that's the case, but it does feed into my insecurity. And so I concluded this entry with a prayer, and it goes, God, please hear my cries from your exalted throne on high. Grant me peace and clarity of mind. Let not my insecurities hold me back from your good work. Permit me, Lord, to be about your business, about your perfect wisdom and understanding. Let me remember, Father, just as the proverb says, that you are my confidence, and I'll continue to seek you all my days, for all I wish is your glory. Amen. So in December of 22, the end of it, that's when Ray came into my life. He approached me and was convinced that I had a role in ministry. And he and I have set out on a journey ever since then. We started off with blog post writing, which I share from time to time, and he helped me. I started teaching a Sunday school class in January or February of 23, and I was actually put in as a deacon in April or May of 23 as well. So you can see everything was just speeding by. And all the while, every other week, me and Ray would meet. And we really focused in on my past. You know, what was the state of my soul back then? Because I would not let go. And I kept hanging on to that, and it was a dark cloud over everything that I did. And finally, we were able to come to the point to understand that all that while back I had not been saved, but the true regeneration I got to experience, the real thing, happened in the summer of 2019. That's when I was truly, truly saved. That's when I got to meet the real God of salvation. So now here I am before you all. I realized that my baptism back then was just me getting wet. And so, as Ray would put it, I'm looking to get baptized on this side of salvation. It was clearly an oversight on my part, but it took a lot in order to get me to finally see the work of salvation that was there, and to get past all of the junk that I had placed on my truck, to finally unhitch it and leave it. So that's why I stand here before you all this morning. That's why I'm teaching. That's why I'm preaching. It's because God has done something within me, and I truly believe I'm following His footsteps, His calling. And at no point have I sought any of this stuff out on my own. I was approached by Ray. I was approached for teaching, for deaconing, and all of this stuff. I've let God lead the way, and that's why I'm here this morning. And that's my testimony.